Okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting of the Water Commission to order. We will start with roll call.
Good morning. Chair Mike Kilborn.
Here.
Vice Chair Dave Davies.
Here.
Commissioner Barry Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Michael Jordan.
Here.
Commissioner Megan Burney. Here. Joshua Hagner.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, super. Okay, changes to the agenda. There's no changes.
There's no
today.
changes.
Okay. All right, we'll open it up for public comment this morning. Lindsay Baker, looks like she's got a comment. Come on up.
Oh, looked green. Lindsay Baker, co-president, League of Women Voters. Last week, I attended the state convention for the League of Women Voters. They have caucuses, meetings, business items, and I attended the water committee, the water caucus, and it was very interesting. No one brought up drought except me. Representatives from all over the state. They brought up issues such as subsidence, infrastructure issues, dams, water pollution and water quality, and floods, and how to manage all those items. Again, nothing about drought. The one thing that they did bring up that I was interested in was the Sustainable Water Ground Management Act, which they discussed at length with timeframes and the intent of the act. And I haven't heard much discussion here at the Water Commission about what the city's doing about that. Thank you.
Super, thanks. All right.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we are working on our groundwater sustainability agency formation. It has kind of taken a back burner with all the other drought priorities, but we do have staff working on that, and I don't have a timetable for you today, but we certainly could bring something back, and it's just an update on when we kind of expect to have. We're currently working on a work plan, basically, is what we're trying to lay out. But we are not considered right now a priority basin, but just because of the size of our basin. However, we strongly believe, and I think that the Water Commission has chimed in on this before, that we should move forward with it, and it's in the best interest of the city to establish it. So we are moving forward with that, and I'll bring back an update on our schedule for that.
Super, thanks. All right. We'll move on to appointment of officers. My time has come to an end, so typically we've been rotating through. I believe the next in line would be Vice Chair Davis, and then following him is Commissioner Jordan. I guess I will just need a nomination for the next chair and vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate Commissioner Davis for chairperson.
No, second that, and also include in that motion Commissioner Jordan for vice chair.
Okay, I have a first
fine.
and a second.
Can we make that effective next month so that you finish out this meeting?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. We'll start it next month. Okay. Any other nominations? No? Okay, and I will take a vote for, we have a nomination for Commissioner Davis to be chair, Commissioner Jordan be vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, super. Passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to the consent items. The only thing on the consent items is meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments?
I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. The meeting minutes are just a little sparse given what we talked about last time. So, for example, under the Water Resources Manager's report, it says Joshua Hagmark reviewed the report and highlighted items of interest. I think we had about a 20-minute discussion on how we agendize and when items come to us. And the outcome of that was that the commission had asked for a off-camera work session. And I think we are still interested in that, but I'll leave that to the group. But requests like that should be included in the meeting minutes when there's an action that we've asked to be taken. I understand we don't want to include every single small detail, but that was a pretty big discussion item with an outcome to it that I'd like to have reflected in these meeting minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to make the same comment. We actually scheduled a special meeting, which later was canceled, and scheduled a work session, which was later substituted for the regular meeting. And so yeah, hopefully somewhere on this agenda, we'll get back to that discussion. But minute-wise, I agree with the comment by Commissioner Bernie.
Okay. Yeah, I did notice that too. Well, we are going to talk about that stuff later on today, so that'll be good. Okay.
Otherwise, I can move approval with that addition.
All right. I have a motion to approve. Second.
Second.
Okay. All right. First and second, all in favor to approve?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Oh, we have one abstain because you weren't here last month. Okay. All right. So 401. That one. Okay. Cool. We'll move on to item 7A then. Infrastructure repair and community service needs. Mr. Demore.
All right. Thank you, Chair Kilborn and members of the Water Commission. My name is Brian Demore. I'm the city engineer with the City of Santa Barbara. And today I'm going to be doing a brief presentation on infrastructure needs and community service needs throughout the city in relation to general fund needs. I don't know what this committee's awareness is of what's been going on at the council level discussing this item over the last year plus, but right now the council is contemplating a sales tax increase that would go on the November ballot. So this is going to provide some background for that line of thinking, and at the end there'll be some time for questions. So the infrastructure needs, we're not the only ones. It's not isolated to Santa Barbara. This has been talked about at the national level a lot recently, and locally we've been talking about it a lot for roughly 10 years, and I'm sure it goes back even further than that. But there was a task force in 2008. Many members of the community participated in that, and they came up with a report, and there were recommendations. Some of those things we were able to implement. Unfortunately, that report came out just as the recession was hitting, so a lot of the things that came out of that report were put aside for a while. But the issue hasn't gone away. Things picked up again in 2014 and 15, and Councilmember White was part of that effort, I believe, with Councilmember Rouse, going around and did a bunch of community workshops and got a lot of feedback from the community on infrastructure needs and how to address that with new funding. Didn't quite get a consensus on how to move forward, but the issue's still there. The issue's always going to be there until we come up with the money to do something about it. So one of the biggest assets that the city has are our roads, and everybody's aware of that because we all travel around. We had to take city streets to get to this meeting. We take streets to get to work, to go to the shops. So we know the issue. We saw with the rains, we had a wet winter. The roads degraded pretty rapidly during a short period of time. Right now, this is actually 64% of roads being in fair, at risk, or failed condition. That was actually before the rain, so that number's probably gone up. What does that mean? Well, a road that's in relatively decent shape can be maintained through preventative maintenance measures that are less expensive, such as slurry sealing. That's what's shown here. That costs in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000 to do a block, and it buys you roughly 5 or 6 years of additional life. And that we have 6 pavement maintenance zones in the city, so it times well with that. The next time you come back, you can hit it again or do some other treatment depending on what's necessary. But we haven't had enough funding to do the preventative maintenance measures over the last 5 to 10 years. So pretty much all we're able to do is treat the most traveled roads that are in the worst condition. So it's total triage mode, and unfortunately it is more expensive to be doing those types of repairs than the preventative maintenance, but we can't let our main arterials fall into a state of disrepair. So our residential streets just aren't getting any attention, and that's unfortunate. how did we get to this place? Well, our primary revenue streams for pavement are the utility users tax, state gas tax, and Measure A. And if you were to lump those three funding sources together and look at the trend over the last 10 to 15 years, it's basically flat. And that's if you were to look at it in real dollars. So in today's dollars, we've lost a tremendous amount of buying power because of the increase in material costs, labor cost. Just shown here is the asphalt cost, how much that has risen in 15 years. So with a flat revenue stream, we can only do at best half of what we could have done 10 years ago. Pavement isn't the only issue. There are a lot of other issues citywide, general fund infrastructure needs. The redevelopment agency, the loss of the redevelopment agency has been a big impact, and I think there's been a little bit of a delay in noticing just how significant that loss, the impact of that loss is, because we were able to secure some of that funding. Even today, we're still putting out projects that are funded with leftover RDA money. But we're basically at the end of that, and over 5 years since it's been eliminated, we've lost about $100 million that would have gone not entirely to infrastructure, but based on past use of RDA funds, a lot of it would have. So we're seeing things like State Street not necessarily being as well kept as we would like. Other issues throughout the general fund, the police headquarters has been talked about for many years. That was built, I think, in 1959, and the police force has dramatically increased, as has the size of our city in that amount of time. So it's overcrowded. It's got building code issues, the most significant of which is seismic. This is an essential facility, and it doesn't meet current safety standards, so they may not be able to fully function out of that facility following a seismic event, and that's something that we would want to be able to invest in and know that the building and the force would be able to be there when we need it most. Also on the public safety side, fire department has a lot of needs. They've got neighborhood fire stations, such as this one pictured here, the Sola Street Fire Station. Great looking building, but being a historic building, there's only so much you can do functioning out of it, and you can see the modern fire apparatus, just how tight it is to get in and out of that garage. I've heard there's about an inch of clearance all the way around, so I'm glad I'm not the driver. Another opportunity that we're looking at for fire department is out at Fire Station 7. That's near the old Sheffield Reservoir, and it's also adjacent to Forest Service facility, which is right behind it. You can see in the trailer. So we'd like to team up with them because we both have needs for a more modern facility out there, and whether it be here or located on the other side of the old reservoir at that site, we're not sure. But without the money, there's really not much point in getting too far along in discussing this with the federal agency. So as I mentioned, the police station not being seismically safe and some of our aging fire stations, we have a lot of historic buildings throughout the city. Library, Parks and Rec has a ton, and being able to continue to operate out of those facilities presents a lot of challenges because there's an interest, and I think it's valid, in maintaining that historic look. I think that's part of what makes Santa Barbara special, but it's really costly, and we're barely able to, and in some cases not even able to maintain, such as like the Carrillo, the basketball court. There are things that are no longer in use because we haven't been able to upkeep them. This pictured here is Thousand Steps, provides coastal access from the mesa, and I've been told that this picture is outdated, that railing is now gone, which not a surprise based on the amount of rust that's there now. And I don't know what's more of a hazard, not having the railing or having a railing unfortunately, that looks like that. Good news, recently, it looks like we are getting some funding which will be applied towards maintaining this important piece of infrastructure. There's been a lot of recent talk about State Street and what are we doing for State Street and the changing retail. And again, without the RDA, I think that's something that the RDA maybe would have been able to jump right in and provide some assistance on. We don't have a revenue stream to continue to reinvest in State Street. I think that's critical, especially with everyone. If you've been up and down State Street recently, you'll see that there's a lot of changing going on. There's more vacancies than we would like to see there, but hopefully it's just State Street's had a lot of different eras, I guess, and we're going through another one here, and it always comes back stronger than ever. We'd like to have a revenue stream to invest in it, but not just State Street, the other important commercial corridors in town. So what does this all amount to if we were to sum this all up together for our infrastructure needs? In working with the Finance Committee last year, we came up with a dollar figure of $25 million per year of unfunded infrastructure needs. And a lot of different options were looked at on how to fund that shortfall, and what has been landed on as the most feasible right now would be a 1 cent sales tax increase. That would generate about $22 million per year. This slide says that council is interested in this and will decide in early July. I'm hearing that it's actually going to be the last meeting in June where it will be discussed. I don't know if action for sure will be taken that day, but it is on the agenda tentatively for the last meeting in June. What is what does 1% look like? Well, right now we're at 7.75. The state sales tax is 7 1/4. The extra 1/2 is Measure A, which is a county-wide transportation sales tax. So 1% would get us to 8.75, which would pretty much put us in the middle of the pack with other comparable cities in California. Just extra bit of information, of that 7.75, there's only 1% of it that comes directly to the city of Santa Barbara. So going to 8.75 would effectively double the amount of sales tax that would come towards the general fund. This slide here, I'm not going to go through it, but a whole bunch of California cities are already at 8.75 and above. I think there's 65 listed here. And actually, I'm going to go back to the previous slide. I wanted to point out the two outliers, Long Beach and Santa Monica. I've actually heard that they're going to be up over 10%. They've already approved measures to go over 10%. So they're already at the top, and they keep going. So in response to this, council approved a consultant to poll the community to gauge interest and receive some feedback as far as what the priorities would be and what things they would like to see in a ballot measure. The priorities here, a lot of what we just talked about: public safety, streets and roads, pothole repair. More than just pothole repair, though. We want to be able to resurface our streets. One thing I get asked sometimes, and being the Water Commission, I'll take the time briefly to discuss. I'm sure you're aware of the water main replacement needs citywide, and there's a concern of, okay, if you start repaving all of the streets, well, what about the underground utility infrastructure? And hopefully, with desal now coming online, the rates can stabilize a bit, and we'll see, as if this measure passes, we'll be able to also be able to invest in a more robust water main replacement program, and those two efforts would be coordinated so that we aren't repaving a street that has a really old water main that has seen breaks on it in the past and may break again in the future, so that there isn't either a break or a future water main replacement project and we end up with a trench in our brand new street. So that's something we definitely try to avoid. Some other important feedback that the consultant received from the community during the outreach effort was a strong interest, and I think everyone would be in agreement on this, that all funds are spent locally. The great thing about the sales tax measure is constitutionally those funds must stay locally. The state can't come and take it. The feds can't come and take it. That's our money. So that we can assure the community would be true. But the other piece of it is oversight, accountability, transparency. We're hearing a lot about that, wanting reassurance that the funds will be spent on infrastructure, on these critical service needs, and not going towards staff, those other types of things. And I think council's been hearing that message. We've had council members at I've been presenting to various boards and committees. There's been public meetings. So that's been a lot of feedback that they've been receiving, and I'm sure it'll be part of their discussion in June, at the end of June, when they discuss the item. Another thing that was interesting that came out of the polling, there was slightly more interest in a measure that did not have an end date. So when staff was working with the finance committee, we kind of went into it thinking it would be a 20-year or a 30-year thing. But I think when the information was presented to the public, they kind of saw that the need doesn't go away at the end of that period of time. Things that you invested in early on at year 20 or year 30, they probably need attention again. And so there was slightly more interest. I'm not sure that this means the ballot will or will not have a sunset clause, but just I wanted to provide that feedback that came out of the polling. So that's really the end. There's a ton of information online. SantaBarbaraCA.gov. Infrastructure repair and community service needs is the first thing that pops up, and there's lots of information on the sidebar. I also have set up an email address specifically for this, infrastructure at SantaBarbaraCA.gov. And with that, if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to stick around for a bit and answer.
Chairman, I'm not personally familiar with the seismic safety issue at the police station, but within the water and wastewater realm, I think the El Estero wastewater treatment plant is a big concern seismically. It's an area of liquefaction, and losing that plant would obviously be a big problem for the city. And I'm not sure there's a whole lot can be done to retrofit it. It's on pilings that go 70 or 80 feet down below it, so that's what it was designed 50 years ago to do. But I'd say that should be a concern, and I don't quite understand how the rest of the infrastructure needs are separated from water and wastewater needs, which in the past have sort of been self-financed and in a separate world. So I don't know if, and our infrastructure with the water mains, they typically classify them by how old they are. And I wonder if that's done with streets and other things too, classifying streets over 50 years and streets over 20 years and so forth in terms of maintenance needs.
One of the challenges that we have is the water mains have a 80-year replacement cycle, and our streets they try to get to every 6 years with some type of maintenance. And so in the past, the difficulty has been the streets budget not having enough to do certain work, or they'll have a plan and then it'll kind of fall apart and they'll have to do something else. And so been having the staff try to work together. It is unfortunately extremely complicated to get the water main replacement schedule and street schedule kind of lined up. But given that they're there every 7 years, there is some flexibility on the street side to hold off on doing stuff if we know 4 to 5 years out what we're planning to do. And I think that's a presentation I'm hoping to bring back, basically an effort that we need to ramp up our water main replacement effort and I think start to condition it out. But as you kind of mentioned, there is a whole modeling that goes behind what we replace. Some of it is age, but unfortunately we find that some of our older pipes may be better than what we got in the 1950s. and subsequently there are parts of the city where the soils are more corrosive, and so those pipe needs to be replaced differently, different schedule. And so there's a whole asset management spreadsheet what we've been working on and putting together to help us kind of lay out a longer term plan for replacement that hopefully we can work with streets on to help minimize. I can't say we're going to completely remove those emergency cases, but try and minimize at least the planned replacement work impacts.
Yeah, and on the street side, basically there's two primary factors that we look at. It's the amount of traffic that it gets, and then the condition that it's in. And all of our roads are inspected. So every 2 years we inspect 1/3 of our city. So that works out to about a 6-year inspection cycle. So a road that's in better condition but it doesn't get quite as much traffic may not be prioritized over a road that gets a tremendous amount of traffic, because the rate of degradation is related to traffic and weather. So that's generally how we do it, and we have very limited funds at this point in time.
Just verifying, this has nothing to do with anything water or wastewater related. There's no funds in here for main replacements. There's no funds in here for anything water or wastewater.
That is correct.
Okay.
Sure. It's just a quick question on the 2/3 simple majority. People basically wanted this to go to infrastructure. So if it's as general as just infrastructure, can the council commit to just infrastructure and then still do a 50% simple majority in the vote?
So what's being contemplated right now is a general tax, which
Correct.
is
That's
50% plus one. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. So there aren't as many strings attached to how that funding can get spent, but council does have options in terms of one thing that I've heard is a possible resolution, and I know there's been some other ideas tossed around to try to get the confidence level that it will be spent on what we all want it to be spent on, but there's some skepticism out there, and I think it would be good to have some kind of language or commitment that council and staff could be held accountable to.
Great, thanks.
So just to put a couple exclamation points on your presentation, because I've seen this several times, it is June 27th, and if on the council agenda, and I think if people are supportive, I think it behooves them, us, to either let your council members know or show up at council on June 27th and talk about it. One of the things you didn't mention that I've heard in other reports is that the level of street repairs needed right now, there's a huge number of streets that just can't be triaged. They actually have to be repaved, and that grows by the day, and it just can't be avoided any longer where you're slowly seeing over it. I have this guy next to me has heard these. He's going to continue to hear these for the next several weeks, but I have reservations with this. I'm supportive of it, but for a couple of the reasons you just heard. And one of the responses to the accountability is that, say, for a police station, if you encumber yourself to a 30-year bond, those monies and the monies that come in as a result of the sales tax are encumbered to that process. They can't be used anywhere else, even though they're coming into the general fund. So that's another way too. But in terms of that too, I think one of the important things is, say, the number I've heard we've been spending recently, historically, a couple $1 million a year on street repair. I think it's important that the council politically every year make a reaffirmation as part of the budget process that they're not going to let that historical funding erode while they get a new funding base, so that it's actually in addition to that, so it doesn't become a shell game where money moves around inside the general fund. And the other thing you're going to hear continually from me is when you say oversight to a person like me, that means to me that we did what we said we were going to do. I've served on one of the school board's oversight committees, and that is not what oversight is in that particular environment. Oversight in that environment is, did we go out and get 5 RFPs? Did we dot our I's and cross our T's right on the contract? It was not did we do what we said we were going to do with the money we asked you to contribute? And I think the council will have an opportunity to craft that in a way that's truly an oversight as it means to laymen, rather than an oversight in a weasel kind of way as it applies to initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just chime in briefly, having had this be at the core of my efforts for my council career and my water commission career. I think that the pipe replacement program is even the leader in the city's infrastructure efforts. It goes back 30 years, and you guys appreciate the difficulties of keeping that on anything resembling a schedule and a budget and all that, and you actually have a funding source. So those struggles in taking over to the city, which very recently I heard this number about Mr. Samario brought it out, and that is we are a $30 billion machine. So what we're talking about here is, shall we say we're talking about in the next 30 years, $750 million going into a $30 billion machine extra. It's in scale. And it's also a point that Mr. Armstrong made recently, or I'd say a year ago, was if we don't do this, that $30 billion value will erode. So we are protecting, we're doing lots of good things with this, but protecting the value of this is one of our key roles. Also, during the last decade, there's been this process of reiteration, and it's where every time the questions are asked, staff has come up with the next set of information. What about our sidewalks? What about our drainage system? What about our buildings? And each time there's sort of a closer look on crap, this is in bad shape or whatever. The next round of effort is being made in focus. And so that's where finally we've gotten to a number that's between $500 and $600 million sort of is the number that we hear out there if we were able to just throw it all out there today, that's the kind of money that would be needed to get everything all totally up to snuff in a short time. So, and another one that's been interesting to me is Edison. It took 5, 6, 7 years to finally get Edison focused enough to go, your system is really out of date. And we're going to be seeing the next 2 years a lot of places torn up because Edison is finally investing real money in our system. It took Tony Bennett getting canceled on a first Thursday. I really believe that was the big bang that got Edison and got everybody going, including Edison. So anyway, streetlights, signals, vehicles. Just imagine trying to replace fire engines. Those are $1 million machines, and if the money isn't there, it doesn't happen. Our buildings. All of these things have now been looked at and this concept brought forward. So it's been a real collaboration. And then as we've seen RDA go away in the midst of this, it's aggravated the problem that much worse. So, and I appreciate Mr. Jordan's comments about skepticism, about what the alternatives are. We started 3 years ago with a half-cent for 20 or 30, it might have been 30 years, but it was either 20 or 30 was being discussed. And so we've had to bump that up over time. Frankly, a half-cent 3 years ago might have done a bunch. Just when you think about interest rates and construction costs, we've seen those expand really fast in the last couple of years. Anyway, I appreciate that Brian, that you're making this tour with this information. I think it's critical to setting us up for a good education going into this election.
All right, great. Yeah, I think this will do a lot of good for the city. So I do see the challenges with how the water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure can weave in with the street repairs. I feel like there might be a situation where we can get into, I don't know, maybe forced into replacing things just because we're going to replace a street, but I see the the challenges and reprioritizing things as we move forward. So look forward to hear how that all pans out.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Councilmember White mentioned drainage, and I assume he's talking about the storm sewer system, which is apparently part of the streets and not part of the water system. Some places like City of San Francisco collect all storm sewer runoff and recycle that water. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point of even thinking about something like that, but at some point, the fact that it is conveying water might be appropriate to include storm sewers with the water system instead of street systems.
And Mr. Chair, also that in looking, you mentioned Edison, right? If we actually do move into doing more local renewables, that could also be infrastructure that the city is involved with, just looking forward. So again, if being as wide open, that's why I asked the question about the designation of the funds. Being as wide open as possible to the future would obviously I think be most responsive to what people want.
All right, super. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item 7B. I'm sure we'll have some discussion on this, so let's get into it. Proposed rates.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, and we're pleased to present to you a presentation today on kicking off at least the notice for the rates for 18, 19, and 20. Today I have Malcolm Hamilton here, our Water Resources Analyst, to walk you through the presentation, but we also have a representative here from Bartle Wells, who's here to answer any questions you may have about particularly maybe the model. There's a lot of details there, but if there's any questions, we wanted to make that available to you as well.
Thank you. So today I'll go over a few things. We'll start with the background of the rate study, and what kind of the guidelines were for this rate study. We'll look at some of our financial planning. We'll, of course, go through the proposed rates. Then we'll look at some rate comparison examples, one of which is what we're doing, how they're changing from FY17 to FY18, 19, and 20, and also how we compare with our neighboring agencies like Montecito, Carpinteria, Goleta. We'll go quickly over the adoption schedule once we send notices, and then we'll show you what we're looking for in terms of council action. As Mr. Hagmark noted, we contract with Bartle Wells Associates to do a comprehensive multi-year water rate study. So as the title sheet said, we're looking to propose rates and adopt rates for fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020. Michael DeGroot is the financial analyst and project planner. As you mentioned, he's here for technical questions otherwise. He has a great deal of experience with other agencies, so he can also provide some perspective on ours and other agencies. The rates also that we ask them to develop need to meet the California Water Efficiency Partnership requirements, such that no more than 30% of our revenue comes from fixed charges. That was previously called the California Urban Water Conservation Council, so they've tightened up their name a little bit, but the same requirement. As we had discussed, we came here on April 20th for a water rate development discussion, and just a few days later on the 25th to City Council, that we were looking to develop rates that would increase our revenues by 8% in FY18 and 6% increases in 19 and 20. For 18, we're really targeting our debt coverage responsibilities and making sure we have adequate coverage. We do have a planned use of reserves, and I'll show you what that looks like. And FY20 was kind of geared towards bringing us back and maintaining and stabilizing our reserve requirements as mandated by council policy. So these are the big assumptions that go into the model for the 3-year rate study, that we have the drought continuing through FY19, ending in FY20, or the rain season of 19-20. And then our conservation expectations are to reach 30% conservation target in FY19, but we gradually build up consumption to that point in the model. And then in FY20, we have another 3% bump in consumption. So I want to highlight just a couple things about our financial plan. We project ending FY17 with approximately $9.5 million in reserves. And so we look here, what we've planned to do is draw down our reserves to to slightly below council policy. So we do have a revenue imbalance where we're, of course, taking in less revenue than our expenditures. But if you look in the out year of FY20, we start to recover and we'll put a little money back into reserves. I'll show you a chart just after this. It will make it clear on where we're ending up. So here we are. The blue bars are ending reserve balances in each of the fiscal years, and then the red line represents what we should have according to council policy. So FY17, we plan to be pretty good above, but we continually draw down through 19, and then we increase our reserves just slightly in 20, and we'll be approximately 1 million below. So at that time, we'll have to develop a new rate model and propose new rates. We'll look at our assumptions, we'll look at our financial planning, what kind of consumption there's been, and go from there. In addition, I just want to make a note for the next slide that in these blue bars, included is our total reserves. So I'm going to speak about rate stabilization reserves. They're included in these total reserves. FY18, the 8% increase I had mentioned at the beginning, it's geared towards making sure we have this adequate coverage. So our parity debt obligations require that we have 1.25 times in our coverage ratio. So our net operating revenues have to cover our debt obligations by 1.25 times. Looking at the table below, we are proposing to adequately have the ratio coverage. So in 18 it would be 1.45, 19 and 20 is 1.49 and 1.76. Now, should we have higher conservation than expected in the model, unexpected drop in revenues or other financial scenarios, we do have this rate stabilization fund available to us that we can use as one-time revenue inflows. So in order to meet our debt coverage ratio, we would be able to bring those reserves in to assist us. And now we'll turn towards looking at what we were trying to affect in these rates. Is we do have a very diverse water supply portfolio, and that, of course, has some benefits. Improves our water reliability. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket, so you can spread out the risk or lower our risk and costs. But there's definitely some challenges. Of course, there's different supply costs with each source. As our year-to-year supply mix changes, you can have these potentially volatile water rates. So a good example is that we'll be resting our groundwater basin. It's a supply source that's been there for the last few years, but we intend to not use that supply going forward. That could reorder the rates, or it could create volatility for our customers. Of course, that's not desirable. One of our goals in the rate study is to have some stability for our customers. Of course, they can better plan, and it's better setting expectations. So what we did here was we proposing rates that are developed on the potential yield of each of our water sources. The total amount, when you sum up the potential yield from each of our water sources, is much greater than the individual demand in any given year. So what we've done is scaled those back based on our projected demand. So it provides greater stability, it reduces the rate volatility for our customers, and the year-to-year changes don't have such a large effect. Just to reiterate, the council policy is that we allocate the water sources based to the classes and tiers based on priority levels, and I'll show you a couple slides with each of the priority levels just after this. And then our highest priority customers are allocated the water sources with the lowest cost. And so we don't have to individually go through each of these, but we can look and see that priority one, agriculture, would receive the lowest cost water, and then going down through the different priorities through 5, you allocate the other water sources. So this is the proposed volumetric rates. I believe you got this in your packet, and they're in the rate notice that will be going out to the public. And I'll just go through individually in these different classes and talk about the different changes. So for our single-family residents, in all 3 tiers, we're lowering the rates and keeping them flat. For Tier 1 single-family residents, we're going from $4.56 to $4.44, and that will be flat through FY20. Tier 2, we're going from $12.97 to $12.96, also keeping that flat. And Tier 3, $24.27, and we're lowering that down to $23.98 and keeping that flat. You'll see this as a theme through some of our other rate structures as well, where we've been able to lower them just slightly and then just keep them flat. Multifamily residents, these have the same priority level as single-family residents, so you have the same rate effect on each of them. 456 to 444, flat across for FY 18, 19, 20, and likewise for tiers 2 and 3, just stepping down slightly and keeping them flat. And looking at commercial and industrial, based on the cost of service analysis, we did see that there would be a needed increase in these in Tier 1. What we've done there is that we've phased in the rates such that there's not a large increase in any one year, and that I believe we were able to keep those consistently increased at about 4% a year in Tier 1, so going from $6.28 currently to $6.52 in FY 18. And then 4% increases thereafter. They'll be meeting their cost of service for the class, but we were able to phase that in and recover it over the 3 years. Go to our irrigation. Likewise in Tier 1 here, just like some of our other tiers and classes, we were able to lower that from $12.97 currently to $12.96 in FY 18, and then keep it flat. There is no change for Tier 2, $24.27, and it will be flat through FY 20. The recreation for parks, rec, and schools, they will be raising from $3.77 in Tier 1 to $4.11, and then 9% increases thereafter through FY 20. Like our commercial, this is based on our cost of service analysis, but we were able to phase in the increases again so that they're not getting a large hit up front, and they can gradually plan and adjust to these new rates. For Tier 2, we do see a slight decrease, $24.27 currently, going to $23.98 and staying flat through FY 20.
Question, these are public entities that are getting charged for water. My question is, does the fire department pay for water when they use it, or do they get it for free?
They actually get their water for free. I was recently down at the testing facility as they were going through their trainees and noted that they don't have a meter associated with their training water, but they have and are looking at purchasing a piece of equipment in which, as they do their practicing, it's collecting all the water and they're actually recycling it now. So that's a new piece of equipment that they're pursuing. But yeah, that would have been considered, I guess, a system loss in the past. Yeah, did that answer your question on that one? They no, we don't keep track of that. I think the amount of fires that we've had has been fairly insignificant, and I think kind of at this point rolls into that system loss number. It was something that we did talk about with them, whether there was could we start to track those. Obviously, when we have main breaks, we try to quantify what the water lost was from that, so that we can kind of quantify that with our losses, but at this point that is not collected.
Mr. Chair, could you, Malcolm, could you simplify for me irrigation, parks, rec, Tier 1? This is the one category that stands out that they moved up. Everybody else is pretty flat. Why again is that?
Well, fundamentally, it's based on the cost of service for that tier and class. Last year, there was some rate classes, this tier included, which was limited by the rate notice and supported by non-rate revenue and the gap between revenues and expenses. Okay. So there is some of that built in, but this is going forward the cost of service to provide water to that tier.
Okay, and what's the difference in the cost of service between agriculture and these? Again, agriculture is going down. This is going up. I'm just curious as to the cost of service, why the cost of service to a park is different than the cost of service to an avocado grove.
Well, our Tier 1 irrigation agriculture is the highest priority. So their cost of service, when you deliver them or allocate them to cheapest water source, you see some decreases. There's also another component, and Michael may want to explain further, but there were base costs that were spread throughout all customers that have been lowered slightly. So they're also benefiting from that.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, as we just talked about, irrigation agriculture tier 1, they are seeing a decrease from 342 to 301. Again, holding that flat for 3 years, and a slight decrease in tier 2, $24.27, going down to $23.98 through FY20. And finally, we'll look at the bottom line recycled water. It's going from $3.02 to $3.42, and then increasing thereafter, I believe, at about 12% each year. So the other main component of a water bill is the fixed monthly charge. What we're seeing here is, and I don't intend to go through these individually like I had just done for volumetric, but there are approximately 6% increases in 18, 19, and 20. And that's for all of our meter sizes. They vary just slightly from 5.5 to roughly around 6. There are some other meter sizes higher than 2 inches. Those also have about a 6% increase in each year. And now I'd like to turn and look at what kind of impacts this has on our single-family residential as an example. This does, and I don't have a note here, assume there's a 5/8 meter size. And so on the top there in our 3 columns, we have these different levels of usage. We have low, 400 cubic feet, 10, and 20 at high. And we'll show you a current bill line and then FY18. And the change represents from the current bill to FY18. So focusing on that, our low water users will be seeing an increase of approximately 2% in FY18. Our moderate users will see just over a 0.5% increase in their bill at 10 HCF. And our high water users are seeing just a slight decrease, an almost flat bill from the previous year. And then going into 19 and 20, we see moderate increases again at 3.4%, approximately 1% and 0.5%, and very similar in FY20. And these are some comparisons with our neighboring agencies. This has been a theme in the last few years, which is Santa Barbara has some of the lowest, or according to this chart, the lowest rates for low water users. We move to moderate water use at 10 HCF. We're right in the pack. And then when we move to higher water use at about 20 HCF, we have higher water rates for the highest usages. There's an almost imperceptible red sliver there on our rates for the decrease.
Basically, what is occurring here is our neighboring agencies kind of take a little different approach to there, and I'm not exactly sure how their rates come together, but they tend to take in more of their revenue from lower users, just the way that they're generally structured. They're lower, they're higher, they have higher unit costs for their initial water. So they're basically, which you could, there are two kind of parties to this. They get their money up front. That's kind of how it's structured. But we believe ours is appropriately set up and reflects our cost for service, but it is more of an inclined structure in the way that ours comes out.
We are proposing one new fee this year. It's the auxiliary master meter fee. So sometimes there's these physical constraints where we can put meters. We do an easement agreement and put a meter on private property, and then we'll install a master meter for water accounting. This is something that does require monthly or quarterly maintenance and staff time, but we weren't recovering fees for this. So we're proposing fees as outlined in the table here, depending on the size of the master meter, and they'll be charged monthly, so they're being included in our rate notice to the public. I believe we'll have approximately under 10 master meters, and this will generate approximately $9,000 in revenue. So it's not a large amount of revenue, but it is something we're not recovering, so we're putting the fee in there so we can do a monthly maintenance fee.
And so just for a little clarification, this is where we have city meters on private property. They could not fit them all in the public right-of-way because of the density of the project. There's various constraints. These are city meters that were put on. The challenges we've having with these properties is we don't have, once these services go on to a private property, we don't necessarily have control over whether there's connections in between the city street and our city meters. And so we have found with a few of the properties, again, there's less than 10 out there, that in some cases there is usage in between our meters and the street. And so we have created this auxiliary master meter or auxiliary to kind of be that catch-all to catch any usage in between those meters and the city service. So we're making sure to account for all water usage. We will be bringing back a topic for discussion later this year on master meters, sub-metering, and particularly wanting to get away from putting city meters on private property and maybe moving in a way that provides for private sub-metering is what we're looking at. So that is likely to be a topic that's heating up. The state has already passed legislation that requires all, and we've had this on the books for a long time, but mandates sub-metering of any dwelling unit by January 1st. That goes on the books. And so we see this as being a way to kind of manage all of these AUDs and ADUs that are going forward, is maybe allowing this private entities to meter and bill after it leaves the city right away.
So would the city just be billing on the master meter at that point then?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Chairman? Regarding the tiered structure, the original intent of that was to encourage conservation, thinking that the people who are paying Tier 3 rates would lower their water usage to stop having to pay Tier 3 rates. Now we're basing our projected income on this structure with these Tier 3 rates included. Does that mean assuming that no further conservation is going to be gained by the tiered rate structure, that the people who are paying Tier 3 rates have decided that it's worth it and will continue paying those rates?
Yeah, I mean, I guess yes. The tiered rate structure is these rates aren't set up to punish or to change behavior. They reflect the cost of service for these individuals and based on the priority we've been given by council to prioritize our water. And so to that extent, if they want to use water, it is available, and it is related to the costs associated with our state water and desal water costs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that was my question also. You stated that essentially these are prioritized lower usage, higher usage, reflecting the cost of service, which is the 218 type of question, but inclined with respect to the high users, and that's why we're different than the other agencies. I was just going to comment. I thought that was the right direction to go, given our policy and our experience in that regard. It blended that balance to meet the 218 requirements in terms of cost of service, but at the same time, at least trying to keep the policy intent of the balance between high and low users. So I thought it was well done in that regard.
If you don't mind, I'm going to have Michael come up and talk. He deals with a lot of different water agencies, and so he sees a lot of variation out there. But what he's kind of found is we certainly have one of the most complicated water supplies for any community, and so he can kind of talk to his experience on that.
Yes, so with Prop 218, as a public agency, you have to base your water rates on the cost of service. And in the past, many agencies have kind of taken free rein with this idea of tiers, and they didn't base their tiers on the cost of service. So several years back, the city of San Juan Capistrano actually lost a lawsuit on their rates. And that decision really focused on you have to tie your individual tiers and your tiered water rates with the cost of service, and it focused on what is the cost of your supplies. So what we're finding in the industry is a lot of agencies are eliminating their tiers. We're seeing agencies with 7 tiers, and they have to go to 1 or 2 tiers. And you can use various sort of costs to justify tiers, including conservation costs, source of supply, avoided costs. But most agencies that we see just have one or two water supplies. So we can really only justify one or two tiers. With the city of Santa Barbara, you have 6 different water supply sources with very different costs, and you also have different priorities. And that allows us to charge very different rates for the different tiers. If you were to just charge a uniform rate, you would be looking at something like $10 per 100 cubic foot for all usage. And now compare that to the $4.44 that your residents are paying for on their first 4 units, and it gives a great benefit to the low users. So that's basically what's happening in the industry. Is a lot of these agencies are going to 1 or 2 tiers based on legal requirements.
Here's a proposed rate schedule, rate adoption schedule going forward. In a few days, we'll be going to council on June 20th. We'll present this presentation, and we'll also be asking for direction to mail the public rate notices. We'll have those in the mail about June 27th, and our public hearing date is August 15th. There's a break for council immediately after this for several weeks, so we are going to be asking that we have a public hearing and then an adoption just after. The rates would then be effective immediately going forward. And sometime in late September, customers would begin to see the changes in their water bills. The council action we're looking for is to set a public hearing date and direct us to send the notices. And that's the end of the presentation. Any questions you may have?
I had one thing I wanted to add to. One of the benefits of the multi-year rates that we found, we just recently had a bond rating review, and one of the things that they kind of dinged us on was the fact that we were doing rates every year, which we thought was the most responsive, but they saw that actually as a weakness in our financial stability. And so that was one of their recommendations as well. It wasn't the sole reason we did it, but one of the recommendations that they had was, we find that it's more stable for agencies to adopt a 3-year rate structure or multi-year rate structure in which it shows some stability going forward. We also, I think you're seeing here some of the benefits of that. We're able to, ramp up, smooth some of the cost changes that we have, which are more helpful. We've seen some pretty dynamic rate changes over the last couple of years, which has been really difficult, I think, for the council, the water commission, and the community. And so I think going forward with these multi-rates, which I think we're kind of an outlier. Most agencies do multi-year rates. We were kind of one of the last ones not doing it, but it does allow you to kind of smooth out some of those rate changes as they come up. So.
I have a couple of questions, but just a comment on that tier discussion. So, what's really missing for me in that first set of tables you showed was examples of who's in what category. So and the missing story there. So where does what I would assume a large hospital use lie in that? Where does Parks and Recs lie in that in particular? And then how that affects while you might be maintaining the single-family residence or the multifamily residence, but you're increasing those other ones because somebody in the past has arbitrarily put them in a different tier or different source of water. How does that indirectly then affect me or the community economically or quality of life while maintaining my rate on my single-family residence? You follow my comment? So I see the tiers, but I don't know who's in them, and I don't know who's taking into consideration when you're raising Parks and Rec's source water fees, what that does to Parks and Rec's budget, and how that affects my life or their operations as a result of that decision of somebody being in a different tier.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Jordan, we've obviously reached out to Parks and talked to them about it, and they will be likely coming back to council to talk about an adjustment because it does have an impact. And it was, you remember what the increase in 18 was for them?
I think we've projected a roughly $90,000 to $100,000 increase in FY18.
Maybe not a lot of money, but not chump change either. So
Right. So they're concerned about it, and the alternatives they have are to use less water.
Correct.
So that's going to be kind of the discussion they have.
staff allow things to go unirrigated.
Right.
I mean, all things that maybe somebody might not care about, but other people might care about.
Right.
And so that's, to me, when you show those tiers and where somebody has already made a decision on priorities as a level of policy, and so you hide under that umbrella of the Prop 218. You've complied with it, but really in theory, because you have 6 different sources, you're allowed sort of to game your sources and put sources to the tiers and to actually determine your compliance with Prop 218. You can look at it either backwards or front ways, depending upon how you want to look at it.
There's a little less gaming than you might think. I mean, it really comes down to a quantitative analysis of what each supply cost us down to the HCF, and then we prioritize those in order. And then we basically, I've used this expression before, the bucket approach, and we basically say our ag customers receive the priority water. What is our cheapest? And then we go ahead and fill up the ag bucket of what we expect, and then we kind of move on through those buckets. So there really isn't a lot of room for manipulation in that sense. It really is pretty formulaic.
So I guess really my just overarching comment is when you see those charts, you're just kind of missing who's in those tiers and what is the secondary impact to their budget, to the community's well-being, that type of thing, that that are a result of that priority assignment.
Right.
And whether those are known or just going to be found out when it happens, or
Well, it's a good comment. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything here. We typically highlight, and we've had in the past, we typically highlight the residential customers because that is the bulk of our usage.
Agreed.
But certainly going to our website, once we do get approval, we do have a little rate calculator that, most customers know what class they're in, particularly the commercial folks. They can go in there and type in their usage and specifically see how their bill might change as a result.
And then I have a couple questions. So reserves go out of reserves and into use through this type of process? Is that what happens when council adopts eventually ends up adopting a water rate action like this, and you, as part of that, you have said we're going to use reserves for these 3 years? Is that how reserves move out of reserves in a budget process?
Yeah, it's basically a planned use of reserves, and it's been adopted. It will be adopted as part of the approved.
And when you get to fiscal year 20 or 21, and you're now earning a couple $1 million more than you're using, do they automatically flow back into reserves, or does that have to be another action?
No, they automatically will flow back in reserves, and I think the question we will have in 2021, as we kind of get to that point, will be, do we reduce rates because we've now reserves are a policy, or has something come up? I mean, one of the things that we're currently talking about right now is the purchase of the Chavez property, which is not included in any of this, and potentially how that irons out in this. So
okay. And then my only other question was that slide you have where at the end of fiscal year 2020 you're only projecting like $1.1 million below policy reserves. Why? Wouldn't it be just like pennies to get out of that year and get back meeting reserves? 1 penny?
That's correct. It's a small variance, and it's within the realm of what we could make up eventually when we get there. So I think it's planned for.
It's kind of like you're saying it'll be 27%, but if we get to 20, if we erode that and we have water to use, and we actually just conserve by 25, we'd actually erode that.
That's correct. That's
right?
possible.
I mean, that would be really the best case scenario is, right? There's unlimited water, and we all start using water again, and we conserve it somewhere from 20 to 25%, and then we'll be a little more flush.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I'll wish for.
This is an outcome of the rate model being $1 million below, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility that we'll meet that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On that same note, is the money we're going to spend from reserves strictly due to the rates, or other projects involved in that?
I think
Yeah.
go back. This graphic kind of shows it here. You look at our expenditures. So we have in FY18 58.5 million in expenditures, but our current rates as they are proposed would bring in 53 million. So we have a net deficit of 6 million that we need to, or 5.4 million that we need to make up. And then gradually you see as the fixed meter charges, really where a lot of this is coming in, is really making up that additional revenue. One of the things that, and I'll just head off a question here, is why is the fixed going up but the variable rate not going up? And really the answer there is we're anticipating the sale of more water in 18 and 19, and that's kind of absorbing the need to increase the variable rate. And at the same time, we've talked about this, we're trying to maximize the fixed meter charge because 80% of our costs of running the water system are fixed. And so we're trying to get the full 30% out of the fixed meter charge. So that's why it's going up and you're not seeing much of a change in the variable.
I've got a process question. I saw in News Hawk this morning that City Council actually already approved this yesterday. Is that?
So there's been some confusion. Those were water fees, service connections, and other things that are non-rate related. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up and clarifying that. We tried to make it absolutely clear in the presentation, but it still got picked up incorrectly. That was just fees. People come in for services, connection fees. It was a 3% to cover labor and material costs that have gone up. It was strictly wastewater that they approved yesterday, Tuesday. So, yes, they did.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Well, looks good. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, do we need to make a recommendation here? Okay, so we're looking for a recommendation to present this to council, to set a public hearing and adopt, and anything else?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. All right, super. Okay, move on to item 7C, the Stage 3 drought update. Looks like Ms. Dyer.
Good morning, Chair Kilburn, Water Commissioners. My name is Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and I'll be giving the Stage 3 update today. So I will walk through the status of the drought, our water demands, our water supplies, give a brief reminder of our supply strategy, discuss drought funding, and then at the end we have a recommendation to City Council for the June 20th City Council meeting. So the drought is improved, but far from over. As you can see here in Santa Barbara, we are one of the remaining areas that is still in drought. The rest of the state has been challenged with too much water. So a very different story. It's important to really focus on your local conditions. Even this monitor is a very broad scale. So when you look at Santa Barbara County, there are certain areas of the county that are in a more severe drought than other areas of the county. So here in the South Coast, everyone still has an emergency declaration and has conservation mandates in place. This is Kachuma storage. So the green line is from the last major drought. The black line is from the current drought. As you can see, we tracked pretty well, very closely to where we were in the last drought, which is pretty, I think, a success story, given that this drought was more severe and also lasted longer. So the black line, we're now hovering right around 100,000 acre feet, which is about half full, and has basically rewound the clock for Kachuma a few years back to where we were when we first started making declarations of drought. So our demand status, Here you can see the blue line is our drought target. The red line is our actual water usage. So our community has been saving. We had a 40% reduction in water use from pre-drought demands in April. And our 12-month running average is about 38%. So even though we've had the conservation target was changed to 30%, we're still seeing quite a bit of conservation, which is good for water supplies. A different story for rates. So here is our water production, historical water production going back to the 1980s. You can see there really has not been much change. We're still on kind of the downward trend for our 12-month moving average. We don't expect an immediate rebound in demands. That's been our experience in the last drought, that even after Kachuma was spilling, there were permanent changes that people made, and there would not be an immediate rebound to what demands were before the drought.
Yeah, just add something really quick. We see the 12-month average was 38%. For the model, what we've kind of structured with that is our expectation is in 18 is that we would see an average of about 34% conservation, moving to a 30% conservation in 19. So we are trying to anticipate, and that's the difficult part, public behavior on this. And we do believe that there's been some permanent changes of behavior. We are not anticipating people are just going to automatically start using significantly more water. And so we have tried to build some of that. Obviously, if we continue to see more than 34% conservation through FY18, it's great for supply-wise, but it may make it more difficult to meet revenues.
Chairman, I'm assuming that this shows just potable water use and not reclaimed water use?
This is the total of both systems, potable and recycled water.
The water's getting counted twice.
Well, this is the total system demand, including recycled water. So it's not double counted. It's similar to how our reporting is on our monthly water resources managers report. If you take the total potable system demand plus the recycled water system demand, this is the combination of those two. Okay, so our supply status, Gibraltar has stopped spilling in May. It's currently at 97% of capacity. We are continuing to maximize that source. The water quality is still very good. So we've been pulling as much as we can through the system up to our monthly limits that are part of our agreements and water rights.
We continue to get flows into the reservoir. But at this point, they are going into the Jinchao account. And so it's basically, we have projected out, Mr. Ferguson has kind of projected out somewhere between 400 and 500 acre feet of a release that we'll need to do this year to satisfy that judgment, a water rights release. And so there is water still coming into the reservoir, but at this point, we're taking water out quicker than it's coming in.
What's the timing of that release? Is that, I thought it had to be kind of a monthly thing, but is it, you can do it in a slug?
The judgment only stipulates that you do the release before November 31st. And typically we do a slug over a 2 to 3 week period. So it can vary any time between June 1st and November 31st when we do that release.
Okay, thank you.
Kachuma storage is about half full. The fish releases have resumed. They're about 4 acre feet a day the last time I checked. And we did receive our 40% allocation from the Bureau for this year, and it's looking like in October of 2017, the beginning of the next water year, we'll receive another 40% allocation, with the ability to still request a higher allocation next spring. If we get a bunch of rainfall and Kachuma spilling, we would ask that 40% be bumped up. So we've mentioned before, not all the water in Kachuma is project water. That's why we have the 40% allocation. It's the next chart is produced by the county, Santa Barbara County Water Agency. I'm not going to go through all of the different accounts. The purpose of showing you this is that there's a lot of accounting that goes into the Kachuma project. And when you look at just our project water, the 40% allocation we had this year, it's this part at the very top. The light blue is our 40% allocation. There's about 16,000 acre feet of unallocated water here, and that is what we project will be allocated come October 2017 for next year's allocation. We have our imported water stored. We have fish passage water stored. A&A and B&A accounts are the downstream water rights. And then, of course, there's a minimum pool of 12,000. Something that's a little bit different this time around compared to the last time you saw this chart is there's now a 3-year projection for fish releases and evaporation. That's something that the county has added in here to demonstrate that it's really related to the timing of when the barge would be necessary. So we wouldn't need the barge for 3 years until 2019 based on our current allocations and projections. It also helps to reserve some water for evaporation so that we don't get into a situation where it's coming out of, we've got to change the evaporation formulas. So it's a different approach. I don't know that this will stick and continue to be the way that it's approached, but it's something that we've all agreed to temporarily to agree on the 40% allocation.
Mr. Chair, I think this is a great chart, by the way, and that amount, the project water remaining it's instructive. I mean, that's when everybody out, all 250,000 of us on the South Coast or whatever we are not aware of that small amount. So this is a great chart. The one piece I don't understand now is the ANA buffer. Can you describe what that is?
So this is it's now in the chart as a result of something that happened when, I think it was last year, when Kachuma was at its very low point, and the downstream water rights, under their water rights language, is allowed to release a certain amount of water, and it ended up dipping into the 12,000 minimum pool accounting. So the county has added this buffer in there to ensure that won't happen again. There was always more than 12,000 acre feet of total water when you add up all the accounts, and so the concept of the minimum pool, I think, we never really fell below the 12,000 water level line, but they've added this in here as a result of the negative balances in the A&A account that occurred last year when the downstream water rights releases occurred.
We have yet to really get in and discuss what this means. I mean, in my mind, it's not it's not water rights that we should be holding in a separate account. So I think there's a lot of dialogue we still need to have about exactly how to manage that. I kind of think it should be part of the minimum pool and not in addition to the minimum pool. But
right. So we do have this draft up in the upper right of this chart, because I think a lot of this is still open for discussion. We haven't all come to agreements on exactly what the processes will be going forward, particularly as it relates to our 2020 Kachuma contract that's up for renewal. But this chart is produced by the county, and this is something, the latest version that I have on the water accounting.
So thank you, thank you for that, staff and Mr. Chair. This also speaks to the eroding amounts that the South Coast has, the Kachuma that has to get out of Kachuma. It's a constant scratch away at it, and that 2,000 acre feet down at the bottom is just yet one more little chip at that. But obviously, all those fish releases are numbers that, when Kachuma was created, that was not there, and really, it's fairly recent that kind of water is now set aside. And one of the ironies that we keep running into on the regional level is that a lot of that water, that 4 acre feet a day is what you were saying, is actually going to hurting the steelhead habitat by sustaining the 3 Bs, the bass, the bullfrogs, and the beavers. And those actually impede and hurt the ability of the steelhead who live in tributaries, and that's really the habitat that's really working out there, that really hurts the steelhead's ability to get to complete their path down and up their main stem of the San Ynez. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, back during the drought, I remember staff coming forward saying we had some concern on where the evaporation was being accounted to. Is this moving in the right direction according to your opinion right now?
I think we need to think through it a little more. I have hesitations on looking at a 3-year projection when we're doing allocations. The State Water Project doesn't do that. I think we need to consider potentially looking at a 1-year look ahead. It's hard to predict what will happen 3 years from now. Things could change here. Even the fish releases with the state water rights order that we have in the biological opinion will certainly have an impact on the water availability, but it's hard to predict what the inflows are. We have such a flashy watershed. So I think we need to talk more about how many years we're really going to reserve water for evaporation. Is it going to be 1 year or is it 3 years? Because if we're holding on to that account for evaporation, it could be reallocated or repurposed to something else other than water supply, which we don't necessarily want to happen.
Good. That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
It was really powerful about this graphic, particularly when we were talking with the county. They were pushing for a longer horizon in our planning on this. And you could quickly, looking at the evaporation account, if you go out another year, there really is no water to allocate. I mean, you play that equation. I mean, I think that's fundamentally one of the things we need to get corrected. Kachuma is not a 7-year reservoir. If nobody took any water out of it, all you did was your fish release downstream and evap, it pretty much ate the lake up. There, it's gone in 7 years. So I think really fundamentally we need to revisit that discussion and talk more seriously about what I think a more optimized approach to utilizing the reservoir is, and we're probably talking in the 3 to 4 year range is what is optimum. And that's why we need to continue to diversify our supply mix like we have led by example here. And that is the key is, there's a role for Kachuma to play, but we also have a role for recycled water and desal to play in that mix as well. Mm-hmm.
I have to say this is kind of misleading too, because that A&E buffer isn't that they're already in the negative on that, aren't they?
They're no longer in the negative with the rains that occurred this year.
They paid it back already?
It's been paid back. Mm-hmm. Okay, so state water deliveries resumed. We've been maximizing the capacity as much as we can, and I think all the other agencies will continue to do that through this year. One of the reasons being that San Luis is pretty full, and that's a big change from where we were previously in the drought. With San Luis subject to spilling again next spring, everyone's trying to get their water to Kachuma as much as they can. So the city's imported water and storage, we currently have about 2,200 acre feet in Kachuma, about 3,800 in San Luis, and if we continue to maximize our deliveries, we project to have about 1,800 remaining in San Luis at the end of this calendar year. Because it's at risk of spilling, we're only planning to carry over about 900 acre feet of that to the next 2018. That's how much we could reasonably use within or have delivered to Kachuma within a 2 to 3 month period, assuming a spill would occur in March. the remainder of that 1,800, we're planning to repay AVEC. The city owes water debt to Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency. That's where we've received a lot of our supplemental water purchases over the years that were necessary during drought. Those agreements included an exchange component. For example, if we purchased 3 acre-feet of water, we had to return 2 acre-feet over a 10-year period. So our current water debt is 6,200 acre-feet. AVEC has indicated and confirmed that they can take return of water this year between July and December. So we've actually been in discussions on potential water purchase opportunities to buy water at a lower cost this year and just use it to repay some of that water debt to AVEC.
Is that physically transported to Antelope Valley, or do they have a account in San Luis, so it's just a matter of leaving water there?
We would do the exchange at San Luis, at which point Antelope Valley East Kern can take it whenever they request it. I think they'd request it through this calendar year because of the risk of spill next year. And we are obligated to pay for the conveyance of that water to AVEC when they take it. So the conveyance costs are roughly $250 an acre foot. So if we returned 2,900 acre feet this year, which would be the 900 we already have in San Luis, plus another 2,000 that we might purchase, that would be about $725,000 of conveyance costs that we'd owe to AVEC for returning the water. We did budget $2 million in the drought fund in anticipation of this type of work, and so we would have sufficient funds in order to do this transaction this year.
How does that conveyance cost work? If we just took it down and put it in Kachima, we'd still be paying about the same conveyance fees, or is it different?
They're the same concept. Our conveyance costs are a little bit higher to get it because it has to be pumped up to Kachuma. Ours are roughly $350 an acre foot. So our conveyance costs are a little bit higher just because of the infrastructure and pumping.
Okay, but that's already budgeted into our...
It's already budgeted into our normal water fund budget.
And as I'm sure Ms. Dyer is aware, Antelope Valley is actually the most expensive place to convey water to on the main branch of the State Water Project, because it has to be pumped up there from Wheeler Ridge up to Antelope Valley.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we were approached by the city of Santa Maria in May. They have more water supply from their state water allocation this year than they have demands, and they're also concerned about the risk of spill for next year at San Luis. So they're looking to sell up to 4,000 acre feet of their water. Our agreements with CCWA allow for these types of water sales among CCWA participants. So we have negotiated a price of $225 an acre foot, which would be a total purchase cost of $450,000. And this would fall under that $2 million budget that we have in the drought fund for supplemental water purchases. Santa Maria City Council will consider authorizing the sale on June 20th. Montecito Water District is interested in the other 2,000 at the same purchase price. And this is because it's part of our existing agreements that we can do these water sales internally within CCWA. We will be posting a CEQA notice of exemption if this is approved, once this is approved by the Santa Barbara City Council. I have a recommended action at the end of this presentation, which is for Santa Barbara City Council to authorize the Public Works Director to execute this water purchase agreement.
Could you just real quickly go through, what are the pros and cons of buying this water versus just paying it back with our allocation? I mean, it's a good price, and I'm not saying don't do it or anything. I'm just kind of curious,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's unpredictable to know how much state water allocations we're going to have in the future, and when we might get another opportunity to do this. So the 6,200 acre feet water debt is something I've been concerned about. I wouldn't want us to dig ourselves in the hole any further, since it is a pretty substantial amount of water for the city of Santa Barbara to have to pay back. Our state water allocations, our Table A amount is 3,300. We have not seen a 100% allocation in years, so I don't know that we're going to get close to the 6,200 for quite some time, unless we do pursue additional water purchase opportunities. It could happen, but it might take a long time, and it's also unpredictable. So I'm looking to just kind of get this off the books and start fresh, especially if the drought's going to continue. We don't know what's going to happen next year, and don't want to dig ourselves in the larger hole of water debt.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I just thought I'd throw that question out there.
Okay. Groundwater basins are currently resting. We're taking our Gibraltar water while it's available and while the water quality is good. And so we do have a limited amount of water left in our groundwater basins. If the drought continues, we would plan to restart up our wells as necessary. Full recovery of the basins, just based on past experience of how the basins have responded, could take anywhere between 5 and 10 years before they're completely full if the city does not pump. And there was a request in the last Water Commission meeting to bring back the charts of our water levels. So this, I think I'll show these in this month's drought update, and then going forward, move them into the Water Resources Manager's report. But this is our Foothill Basin, just a few select wells that we monitor. We actually have 60 monitoring wells throughout Foothill and the Santa Barbara Basin. As you can see, we did receive some rainfall this spring, but it wasn't enough to really make a big dent in recovering the water levels. So this is going to be somewhat of a slow process before we see the overall trends change. There's always these seasonal fluctuations, but what we're looking for is this sort of long-term trend to come back up. This is Storage Unit 1, and the recovery here, Storage Unit 1 is more responsive to the city's groundwater pumping because it's a more confined basin. It's under pressure, so when we start pumping, the water levels dramatically decrease, and then when we stop pumping, they go back up relatively quickly. So in Storage Unit 1, water levels are not as much of a concern. What we're more concerned in that basin is seawater intrusion. So I have separate charts, which I didn't put in this PowerPoint, but we have them available if you're interested. We did see some seawater intrusion very near to the coast, but we did not see any that occurred past the 101. So I presented those charts earlier. We haven't really seen much change in the concentrations for seawater at this point. Okay, so for recycled water, we have finished the construction modifications, and we'll be starting a testing later this month on June 19th. It's a 2-week period of testing the maximum production capacity of the plant. And so I think sometime in July we'll know the results of the construction modification. And I don't know if you want to speak to what we're doing on the legal action.
So I know the Water Commission's been interested in this, and I unfortunately can't go into a lot of detail, but we are pursuing legal action to recover costs for the design errors that we saw, and just met with the attorneys last week, and we hope to have this before a judge in the next year. We'll see, but we do have some outside counsel that will be supporting us on this, And I think that's about all I can say at this point.
The good news is the facility has been meeting all of our recycled water demands on the system. So even during the recent construction modifications, we did not need to turn on the Valle Verde well, and we didn't need to do blending with potable water. So that was good that we've been able to meet those demands with recycled water.
Are we into summer demand yet, or is it still coming?
No, it's starting to pick up. I was going to referencing the water supply manager's report. In there, you can see that demand has been starting to pick up pretty consistently. Is there no gap between what that anticipated demand will be and what you're producing now, or will there be a gap?
I think we'll know at the end of this production testing whether we can meet that gap. Last year, we had to turn on Valle Verde well and use some potable water to meet the gap. Sure.
So major construction is complete on May 30th. I think you probably all received an email. We did a big media blast to let everybody know that the facility was online and would be operating intermittently through the startup and testing phase. The phase that it's in right now, we're calling it acceptance testing. They have to demonstrate operation for 14 days. And reading into it some more, they can do it in 24-hour increments. And so far they've had about 5 days where they've had it actually operating for 24 hours. Otherwise, it's been on 18 hours, 15 hours, those kind of stretches. Then they take it down. They want to make some tweaks. As you can imagine, a facility of this magnitude has a lot of alarms set up in it, and so when any of those alarms get triggered, it automatically stops going into the distribution system. They have to go in and figure out what the alarm was from, which allows them to operate this facility with a fairly small staff. That's kind of all the part of the automation. So we expect this. Nothing so far has been too abnormal. Kind of just continuing to work through issues. Given the activity that's going on in site, we're not offering any tours at this point. There's been a lot of people reaching out and saying, "Can I get a tour?" However, when we do finish all of the startup testing and things, we've gotten to some type of normal operation. Our full intent is to offer some type of public open house, allow people to come down and check it out. Anticipating that probably be late summer, early fall, we'll do something like that. So likewise, we'll roll out an invitation to the Water Commission to do a tour as well at some point here when we get to that.
And that small staff is contractor staff, not city staff?
That's correct. The staff for this facility, I want to say it was around 11 staff members to run the facility full-time. Unlike Cater and El Estero, they have to have a proven record of operations before they're able to run this facility in automation for short periods of time, and so they have to have someone here 24/7. So they have 3 shifts a day that roll through here, and I think at least one electrician and one mechanic that are on staff. So those are all contracted staff. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just as a summary of our water supplies, we're currently in year 6 of the drought. We started the drought when Kachuma last spilled, which is in May of 2011. So here we are. And we're planning to use a portion. The green is desalination. The orange is state water. The yellow is our groundwater, which was used previously in this water year. It's now been shut down. And then the light blue is Gibraltar and Mission Tunnel. The dark blue is Kachuma. So we're primarily using Gibraltar this summer, and then that 40% Kachuma allocation that we have serves as contingency for this year, but we would really plan to carry it over and use it next year. And then we have the purple bar, which is our recycled water. This all assumes a 30% demand reduction through the next 3 years. So we do have a small gap projected in 2019, but it's small enough that I think by the time we get there, we can make it up with the resources that we have available to us.
Is that in 7 and 8, does that green bar represent full production capacity?
Correct. The green bar in 2018 represents the 3125 acre feet per year.
So by the time we get there, if we're still calling it a drought, we're, we've got all our eggs there other than what supplemental stuff we can go out and buy, right?
Right.
Okay.
I think even the orange bar is not really maxed out to what if we went out to purchase additional supplemental water from the state water system, we could likely fill the gap too. What's shown here is what we've already got, what already has our name on it. So drought funding, Prop 1 water desalination grant program. I'm going to let Mr. Hagmark, cover this slide as well. I think he's been in touch with quite a few people on this.
So trying not to get too excited about this, but this is something that I've been working on for probably 2 years now, and I know we've been talking about it. But Prop 1 funding, which was passed in November of 2014, we've been following this. I've made a visit up to Sacramento to make sure that the state understood our needs. And the draft guidelines came out in April, and unfortunately they had language in there that would have excluded our project from participating because we will have been done with, have completed all major construction by the time this grant gets awarded. And with the help of many people, including Senator Jackson, we have finally got some movement. And I understand, I just had a discussion with a representative from Senator Jackson's office that says that they have made all the changes that we've requested, and the guidelines are due out this Friday. And so we will hopefully see that the city can compete. And that, again, getting back to that's all we're asking for is the ability to compete in this grant funding, because we believe we have the ideal project that was for this project, for these funds. And the way that it works, based on the draft guidelines, was there's $10 million available in matching grant funds for construction. There was also funding in there for studies, and that'll be something that we'll be taking a closer look at too as well, particularly getting reimbursed for some of the studies that we had to do, and maybe even talking about potentially getting some funding, because I think there's been a strong desire to do some offshore testing to see what the real impacts are of this facility. And the challenge with that is that testing, we did get some costs for that in 2015, and it was well over $1 million to do a test to see what the environmental impacts were. It was a significant cost. And so if we're able to leverage potentially some of these grant funds, I think would like to do that, because I don't believe the impact is very significant, and I think it'd be nice to quantify what it is. So we will stay tuned, but at this point, we should know more next week when we get a peek at this and get to go through it. So this is exciting. I mean, a potential of $10 million. I think the timing for this grant is early 2018 is when they'd like to start distributing those funds. And obviously we have $70 million in matching money that we could put towards that. So shouldn't have any problem meeting our match.
Okay, so we're asking for the Water Commission to recommend that Council authorize the Public Works Director to execute a water purchase agreement with the City of Santa Maria. This is the 2,000 acre feet agreement at a purchase price of $225 an acre foot. There's no return obligation to City of Santa Maria. This water would be used to pay down some of our debt that we owe to AVEC. So City Council will consider this item on June 20th.
Chairman, just a brief question on the chart of the water supplies that you had at the end of the last section. Right. If we go from the bottom to the top of those bars, are those in the order of increasing cost of those supplies?
No, they're not. They're sort of arbitrarily, I guess, It looks like maybe it would have been close to that order, but it's not. It wasn't done with that intention. So, no.
Now, since we're using that to justify our costing that we're developing, it might be interesting to have a chart that ranks them so you can see what is the expensive water that the Tier 3 people are being charged for and the other ones.
It's a interesting point. My only hesitation in doing it would be that cost is sometimes not always the only thing you're considering when you're managing a resource, because we have other constraints like water rights and availability of, overdraft of a groundwater basin. And so sometimes we're not using it. We're forced into using our more expensive sources for other constraints that we have in management of water supply.
So in the orange bar, you have a mix of costs because the purchased water is not always the same cost as the regular state water. So it might be hard to actually set it up that way.
In the there will be a memo that we have that accompanies the rates. Once we get the rate notice out, there's a rate memo that we do. It goes into great detail, and it will answer those questions of exactly what it has in there, what priority each one of the water, and it shows how each one of the water supplies ranks and how it fits into meeting the service to each one of those classifications. So it has some of that information in there.
I think that was the end of our presentation. So,
being said, I will move that we forward the item to the City Council for the Santa Maria water.
If you're moving staff recommendation, I'll second that.
Okay. Do we want to comment before we vote, or no? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
thank you.
All right. Super. Thanks. All right. Moving on. Item 7D. We're going to talk about scheduled upcoming meetings and agenda items.
Yeah, we get into kind of an interesting time of year. People taking vacations, wanting to make sure that we have a quorum here, and also wanting to just talk about general agenda items, as well as to try and figure out a time when we can have the work session that we talked about at the last meeting. I'd like to start off by I had started making a list, talking to my staff, of items that we need to cover in the next 2 months before September, ideally. We have a contract for chemical root foaming that's coming up. Again, it's a fairly administrative item. It's an item that if the council or water commission was comfortable with it, could go to council. It's fairly routine maintenance item. The grand jury report, which I shared with you by email, is out, and certainly raises a lot of interesting issues that, in particular, that somehow we mismanaged this drought, and I kind of have a totally different perspective that we did a pretty noble job in managing what I consider to be an historic drought, and I think that's depending on who's writing the story as to what this drought was and how we managed it. But anyway, I think we need to respond to that. There's some discussion about whether we want to respond as all the water agencies getting together and showing community, we're all on the same page on this, or whether we'll individually respond. We'll see how that kind of plays out. But Kelly will be digging into that, and we'll be working on a response. We have 90 days to submit our comments, and so walking that out, that looks like we'd have to submit our comments by early September. Given the council goes dark on August 15th, we need to really finalize our comments and get those to them before the 15th, which unfortunately the Water Commission meeting in August would be after that time period. So that means we need to see if we can pull together comments before by July, and if we can't do it by July, try and figure out another method of at least getting your feedback before we submit those. Capacity fees, this has been something we told the Water Commission we're working on. Unfortunately, it keeps falling down the priority list, but with rates done and the notices going out, we have made, it's not like we're starting from scratch, we have quite a bit of this done, but it's finishing the capacity fee effort and we could bring that to the Water Commission, we hope, in July. I was also had on here just tentative, and we could do this after September, but this is an update on the secondary aeration project construction. Just wanted to give a status update on that. Water mains, another one that we could push out till September, but wanting to bring back the results of the asset management work we did on water mains and our proposed plan to tackle what we see to be a pretty significant aging infrastructure, just like we heard about the streets and facilities. We've known this about water mains, but trying to lay out a plan that also includes how we'll financially tackle that. And then, of course, we could always provide some type of a drought update, although the information becomes more limited at this point. There's not a lot of changing elements to that. So those are just some of the items I had on the agenda for a meeting, if we had one in July and August. And, of course, I'm here and willing to listen if there's other items we'd like to add to just the standing meeting.
Maybe I'll ask, is everyone available for those July and August dates? Or are we going to have, like you said, some people will be on vacation and stuff this summer, so.
So that's July 20th for those looking at their calendars.
Looking at what the August date was as well.
And then the August 18th, I think it is.
17th.
17th.
Yeah.
I'm out on the 20th of July.
I'm here for both.
I think I said that before.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm available too, so.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we wanted to talk about too, maybe getting together and having our little roundtable discussion. Maybe we should decide when appropriate time would be to do that as well.
Yeah. So is there anything on this? And then I can, on the agenda, is there any other items that we need to add to the regular occurring meeting? It sounds like a July 20th meeting is necessary. I will not be at this, but things will go on. We can easily have this meeting. So
I think it would be good to hear about the results from the recycled water system too at that point if they're ready.
Yeah, there could go.
Mr. Chairman, regarding recycled water, in the past, we had a problem of saltwater intrusion into a sewer line along by the beach there that was causing the recycled water system to have to deal with excessive chloride. Has that been remedied? As I recall, there was some effort to that, but I don't remember the details.
Yeah, that project wrapped up maybe a little over a year ago. But I think a good question is, have we been able to tell the difference? We did do a pretty massive rehabilitation of all the trunk line that's on the beach and sealed up a lot of the seawater that was getting in. So the question is, are we seeing the reduction in our recycled water salt concentrations? And it's been a while since I've looked at it. We were hovering right around 1,500 parts per million. A lot of that had to do with conservation that we've seen in the community too. So I think it might be difficult to kind of extract out there the impacts, but we'll take a look at that and we could provide that as a, if not an update on that.
I was just going to suggest we keep the July meeting so that we could specifically over the grand jury reports and a couple other things you mentioned, and then use the August meeting as a work session since it's already on most of our calendars. Maybe change the location and have it more casual, but...
On that note, do you think you'd have a draft response of some sort on the grand jury by July meeting? I think it's important that we actually have at least a weigh in on that particular. That's a big one. I just skimmed it yesterday, but I think the Water Commission's voice ought to be heard on the bigger issues there. Because I was thinking you may need a special meeting of the Water Commission either in late August or early July if you're going to still make that scheduled at council.
I think at this point we can make it. We're going to make a strong effort to try and make it for that July meeting. And if we need to do something special, I hear you that we'll do a special meeting. It probably would be in early August because we'd like to get to probably council before August 15th at the latest.
If I may, one of the challenges, so we talked about potentially having a unified response with the other water agencies. If we're trying to wrap up our responses by July, then we might be a little bit ahead of everyone else, but just something to have it, to consider. The other agencies might still be working on theirs through August.
Yeah, I was considering that because again, to be determined on how the response is coming forward could determine where we fit in that schedule.
Well, if that's the case, if we get to, a week and a half, 2 weeks before, and it doesn't look like it's going to be ready, we can always have that be the work session and schedule another meeting. That would be the official Water Commission
Yes,
meeting in
correct.
the
That's what I was
first or
thinking.
second week of August. So,
Yeah.
it makes sense, though, to keep the meetings
Yep.
as is, since they're on our schedules, and we'll be flexible with your guys' schedule.
Okay.
All right.
Do want to note that I don't know if I saw your calendar, Kelly, but I think Lisa Arroyo won't be able to make our August meeting, but I think we can pass on if we have a work session. Then we can pass on. I can pass on those comments.
Yeah, and I would say you did mention the root foaming thing. I think we already all saw that presentation and are on board with it, so that could just be a consent item if we get to that point. We don't
Okay.
need a presentation necessarily.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments?
Could you
Thoughts?
just restate what what we decided
Here.
for
So
clarification?
let me try to take a stab at it. So we're going to go ahead and keep the July 20th meeting with a goal of trying to have a grand jury draft response by then. And then on August 17th, have a special work session where we'll work on communication and engagement items.
Pressure's on.
I guess the challenge with that, I mean, just thinking about some more, if we have it on that date, then it's really just a regular meeting. I don't know how was it? I think we had a different
date or something.
Yeah, we had a different format. I think you guys were looking for.
Well, I think it'd still be open to the public, and I don't think it's
Yeah.
a problem to be on it. We talked about going to a different room that wasn't televised, to have it be more casual and more of a collective discussion with anybody who wanted to join as well.
Okay.
But I don't think it matters that it's on the
And we
same.
can keep the agenda short, I guess, for that one. If
Yeah.
Maybe it's just that one particular topic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. We're going to have a water resources manager's report.
Yeah.
We'll move on to that.
So you have a packet here. Just kind of going through it. You can see for May that we're pulling pretty heavily on Gibraltar at this point. Significant amount of water coming down from Gibraltar. Wanted to point out.
What's the max we can take from Gibraltar in a month?
It changes each month, but just over 500 is about as the max that we could, and then sometimes it's less.
Okay.
DSAL, you'll see that we had 27 acre-feet of production in that last part of May. State water, Ms. Dyer, can you comment on what we're doing with state water there? I noticed it seems less than projected, but I thought we were trying to maintain deliveries.
So we're maximizing deliveries to Kachuma, but then we have some state water stored at Kachuma. This is the amount that was delivered into our system based on the demand for the water.
Got it. That's right. Yes, we're starting to accrue a pretty healthy supply of water in Kachuma stored. This is just used, yeah. And then you'll see recycled water. We had planned usage of 76 acre-feet and it ended up being 94. So demand is on the increase there. I'm going to go ahead and skip through this graphic. It was in the drought presentation and take us to the per capita usage, which our 12-month running average being 81. Unless there's any questions, just keep moving. I'm not going to get into rainfall. This Dyer just went through some of these graphics on. So I'm on now wastewater inflows, hovering right around 6 MGD. We did have 2 more spills. We are now at 11 spills for 2017. And just as a reminder, 3 of those occurred on February 17th during that 25-year rain event, which we don't believe should go against our spill goal of 8 for this year, 8 or less. So we're right at that threshold. We will likely, I think we have a plan to bring back and talk about it. We have a mid-year, as part of the consent decree, to do a mid-year check-in and to talk about some of these spills. Some of these spills are not what we've seen traditionally. We've had some 2 and 3 gallon spills, which are kind of, unfortunately, they're all reportable, but more unrelated to roots and grease, what we traditionally might see. So we can talk some more about those.
Is that for the calendar year? This one goes by calendar year.
The calendar
right?
year, yes. Yeah. And then as far as our pass-through work, we did meet with the Bureau staff on May 12th. Actually had a really good meeting with them and have laid out a pretty detailed action plan of things we need to do to move forward. But as you may recall, this process is right now kind of on hold with some questions that around the level of environmental review required for our WARN Act. So we hope to answer a lot of the Bureau's questions that they have and see if we can't get this back on schedule again. So to that point, I did have a few, let's see if I made other comments I had. Just wanted to point out on June 6th, the city had a discussion about the city's sustainability program. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, you may be interested in it. And the reason I bring it up is because I think it has major ramifications for water and wastewater. One of the takeaways I had from it is that the city has set a goal of having 50% of our energy come from renewable, 50% of our electrical energy coming from renewables by 2020, and 100% by 2030. Now, with that goal, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily doing some of these energy projects because there are the cost benefit is there. We may be doing it because it's the right thing to do. And so it brings to the table potentially other energy options. Our facility energy folks will be leading the charge on this, and I'll likely schedule them to come back and start talking about what some of these projects might be as we move forward. One of the ones that has been interesting is with both hydro and cogen, we did not hold on to the renewable energy credits. We let those go. And so likely by 2020, probably in 2020, we would start repurchasing those energy credits, somewhere around $30,000 to $40,000 to repurchase those every year. But those will be part of, I think, a master plan of opportunities to get us to that 50% threshold and then how to take us to the next step. So I bring that up. Those will be additional costs in the future that we'll need to figure out how to tackle. And then I also wanted to mention on June 7th, we did submit an offer on the Chavez property. And it is with the realtors and the, what do they call it? Not the successor agency, but the review board. They're supposedly going to look at those options at the end of the month, and then we will likely get a counteroffer. Likely, we heard there was multiple offers, which could be 2 or more. We're not exactly sure how many were submitted. So we'll be following that. Likely there'll be a counteroffer, and we'll see where that goes. If there's any other questions, happy to answer them.
Chairman, in terms of comments to the grand jury document, should we send those to Ms. Dyer, or are we able to share those with the other commissioners in the meantime, or are we constricted by the Brown Act?
We are constricted. I think I need to send them to Ms. Dyer and myself, and we'd be happy to take those, and we will bring those back as part of staff's comments as well. So yeah, I'd appreciate your comments, but yeah, don't share them amongst each other, I think, at this point.
Okay, super. Next meeting will be Thursday, July 20th here at 9 a.m.
All right,
Meeting
thank you.
adjourned.